Here. Oh, oh, sorry. I'm the other YouTube guy called BachScholar. Before I get to the topic at hand, I just had to throw that little thing in there. I've been working on my Robert Estrin impersonation now for a while, and it's fun. I'm just having a little fun. I like Robert, so it's nothing against him. He can do impersonations of me if he wants to. Did you notice how I'm a long-haired hippie now? I grew my hair. I got my hair down here. It looks nice, doesn't it? Nice for somebody who just turned 62. Aren't I just cool with my Hawaii shirt and my long hair? Actually, the reason why I did my Robert Estrin impersonation, really, truthfully, was because I put on this shirt, which I have this Hawaii shirt, and as you know, if you watch any of Robert's videos, he often will wear kind of like Hawaii style shirts like this. So it made me think of Robert when I wore my Hawaii shirt today. So anyway, the topic of this video is tempo. Tempo. It's a really important topic. Have you ever worked on something like this first harpsichord or piano concerto of Bach? You get it nice and slow, and then you'll speed it up. And then maybe you might want to speed it up a little more. I would say, in my opinion, I think that the third way is probably the fastest I would do it. The way before that, the slightly slower way, is pretty good. But it doesn't seem quite fast enough. It does when you're first learning it. But this is the topic of this video. It's tempo, and it's a confusing topic. A lot of people get confused. How did Bach want it? Did Bach want this? He marks it allegro. Okay, he puts a C with a line through it, which is cut time, but it's really not like all a brev. It's really more in 4/4 with a fast quarter note beat, with lots of 16th notes in it. And it's traditionally played pretty quickly, around maybe 100 seems to be sort of the average kind of tempo for it. Maybe 100 beats for the quarter note beat seems to be sort of the average around there. Slower performances maybe in the lower 90s, maybe in the quarter note. So it's maybe 90 to 100 is the range, maybe a little bit over 100. So, but it ranges if you listen to performances, but then it leaves you with the questions, well, how fast did Bach want it? We don't care how fast Glenn Gould or somebody else plays it. Yeah, we care about that, yes, but we really care more about what did Bach want? Well, over 30 years ago, I had this life-changing epiphany, which allowed me to discover all of Bach's tempos. Believe it or not, this sounds untrue. This sounds too good to be true, but it is absolutely true. In 1992, I discovered a secret system that Bach used for his compositions that allowed me, and now you, because I'm showing you this, allows us to figure out exactly how fast or how slow he wanted these compositions. It's really astonishing research, which I'm going to show you in my book in progress, my forthcoming book, Tempo and Duration in the Music of Bach. I've been working on this book now off and on for 33 years, since graduate school, and I am very excited to announce that I see light at the end of the tunnel. Only 2 or 3 months later from this video, and I'll have it done. I'm working on getting it done, finally, after 33 years. And I will show you in my book the tempo of almost all of Bach's works, for everything, all the cantatas, most of the keyboard works, everything like that. But without any further ado, I don't want to go into that. Just stay tuned In this video, I will change to a new view on my computer, a screen view it's called. I'll change to a screen view so you can see the screen. I'll have a couple analytical tables up there of Bach's Piano Concerto number 1, and also the origin of this concerto, which is one of Bach's cantatas that he wrote roughly 10 years before this concerto. So in order to understand the tempo that Bach had in mind for the 3 movements of his first piano concerto, we really have to look at that cantata that he composed years before this. So stay tuned, and I will show you Bach's tempo secrets. Okay, so first things first, I want to show you the tempo matrix that I've been working with for the last 30-something years. These are a set of numbers. They're all whole numbers, that is, they're not fractional numbers or decimals. And it is a perfect matrix of numbers that are related to this, what I call the FCNV. That stands for the fastest common note value. Fastest common note value. So if you take a tempo, say 144 beats per minute, and you take 2 of those, it becomes 72 beats per minute. If you group 3 of those together, it becomes 48 beats per minute. If you group 4 of these together, it becomes 36 beats per minute. And if you group 6 of these together, it becomes 24 beats per minute. Then if you go up a little bit faster than 144 to 168, I'm not sure how much that is. I haven't really calculated. It's about maybe 10% faster or so. So you go the next step up, and you have 168. So 2 of these make 84. 3 of these make 56. So forth and so on, and you just go up the line. So see, each of these fastest common note values increases at the same rate. Okay, so each one of these rows represents what I call a family of tempos. This is like a family of tempos, and those are all equal. For example, if you take your typical 4/4 time, you'll be working a lot with this column right here, 4s. 4s is the column that I work with the most, because if you have 4/4 time with just typical 16th notes, you're in this column here. So basically you have to choose a tempo from this column for one of the tempos. One of the numbers in this column will be the ideal tempo for any piece in 4/4 or 2/4 time or 3/4 time, anything where the beat is divided into 4s, where you have like 16th notes, for example, or an alla breve with 8th notes would fall into this category. So really you're only limited to these tempos. So by process of elimination, usually you can find the best tempo for each movement of Bach by simply experimenting with each one of these and seeing which one works best. So because these tempos or numbers here are assumed from the outset. I'm not in any way claiming that Bach came up with these numbers. Okay, anybody could come up with these numbers with this particular matrix. So this matrix is unique in that it gives us the actually ideal tempos. I call them perfect tempos. And I've been working with this matrix, like I said, for over 3 decades now. And I'm assuming these as tempos from the outset. So let's go now and look at Bach's first example here. I want to talk about his Cantata number 146. Now we'll get to his to Bach's keyboard concerto, his harpsichord concerto in a few minutes, but we have to first go over Cantata number 146, By the way, Bach's cantatas are not chronologically organized. So, 1 is not the earliest, and, 200 is not the latest. So they're organized according usually to the time of year, I think. I'm pretty sure they're organized like the Easter ones are kind of together and so forth. So here is cantata number 146, Bach composed in, they think it's probably 1726 to 28 in that time. I think they're not sure. Anyway, he wrote this cantata, and here's the table for the cantata. Here's all the movements. It has 8 movements. These are the keys. These are the time signatures here. These are the number of measures over here. These are the what I call the ideal number of measures that Bach, I believe, was aiming for in order to achieve these particular duration ratios here. So I'll have more on the actual workings of the whole entire cantata at a later time, but since this video is mainly about Bach's first harpsichord concerto, I don't want to spend too much time on this cantata, but I'll just point out first, before we go to the keyboard concerto, that you see the first movement here, the allegro, and the second movement, the chorus, which is an adagio. Okay, these are the exact movements that Bach used for his D minor piano concerto. So all he did was he just borrowed these and put these in his concerto a few years later, which we'll look at in a couple minutes. So what I want you to look at here is focus on the number of measures here. So in the first movement, in D minor, 4/4 time, there's 190 measures. Now from this table here, from the tempo matrix, okay, we're going to look in this column here for us. I'm assigning it this tempo here, 96, because from my research, I've discovered that 96 beats per minute was Bach's faster allegro tempo, usually sort of more like a vivace tempo, but he would use allegro interchangeably, and allegro for Bach was usually one of 2 tempos, usually either 84 for a slightly slower allegro, that was the more common allegro time, and then he has 96, which was the slightly faster allegro speed or vivace speed. Sometimes he would even say presto, but oftentimes presto meant even to the next level, which is here. This doesn't mean that nothing can go faster than 108. Of course it can. This table can continue forever. I'm just stopping it here because this seems to be the 108, like in 4/4 time or whatever. That seems to be pretty much the fastest tempo you'll see in probably 99% of Bach's works. So really there's no need to go any faster than this row right here. So you select the tempo. So I'm selecting 96, and I'm plugging 96 in to here. So let's do the math. So what you do is, I actually have my calculator here in front of me. You'll hear me mashing the buttons here on my calculator. So we're going to figure out if this movement is played at if this movement is performed at 96 beats per minute, and it has 190 measures of 4/4 time, how do you determine how long it lasts? How many minutes and how many seconds? Well, you can see it lasts 7:55, just a little bit under 8 minutes. But how do you do that? Well, you take 190, the number of measures, times by the number of beats, times 4 beats per measure, divided by 96. Divided by 96 equals, you'll get 7.9166. Okay, so now what you have to do, really to get it accurate, to put it into seconds, you go -7 equals, and then you go times 60. So basically you're timesing that decimal by 60, and that gives you 54.99, basically 55. Okay, so you translate the decimal into seconds,
by multiplying it by 60. And then you discover that if this is performed at 96 beats per minute, which is a very good tempo, by the way. I mean, that's not contrary to what performers do. This actually agrees with what a lot of performers do. In fact, the funny thing is, the kind of scary thing, freaky thing about this is, just before this, I said, oh, I'm going to listen to a recording and see how it is. Well, I chose the very first thing that popped up. I forgot her name. A, European woman. It's like 7 million views, like a lot of millions of views on the video. She plays this concerto. It's the first one that comes up. And anyway, timed first movement. Very interesting. You'll notice she plays the first movement almost exactly at 8 minutes. I think in fact it's like 7:55. I timed it. That is really amazing. Well, that just sort of proves my theory. So my theory is supposed to not go against tradition. It's supposed to actually support tradition. And at the same time, tradition sort of supports my theory. Well, anyway, let's get back to this. So Bach wrote 190 measures in this. And let's say assuming the tempo 96. Let's assume Bach assumed 96, okay? Well, what happens next? Well, we have the next movement is a slower movement. It's a chorus. It's an adagio in G minor, 3/4 time, 87 measures. And I'm assigning the tempo 48. So 48 right here is this row right here, which is categorized as adagio or largo. So typically most of Bach's adagios and largos and slower tempos like that tend to be here, like either 42, 48, or 54. They tend to be one of these three tempos right here. So usually you can just find out by process of elimination which one is best. I think for the second movement of this piano concerto, 48 per quarter seems to be the best. 42 is a little slow, I think. 54 is a little fast. So I think 48 is sort of the golden tempo for that. But here's the kicker now. Okay, so you have your tempo. You have 48. So let's do the math now. Let's go 87 times 3, because there's 3 beats in a measure, divided by 48 equals 5.4375. Okay, so we're going to go minus 5. You're going to take that decimal, take 0.4375 times 60, and that's going to give you the seconds. So we've got 5 minutes and 26 seconds. I also rounded off to the 100th here, or I put the 100th in there. So 526.25. I mean, it's not a big deal. I just do that for scientific reasons, just to make it accurate. So in other words, what this tells us is this. When this movement is performed at 48 beats per minute at this appropriate adagio speed, if it were performed that way, robotically, I guess, to the end, it would last 5 minutes and 26 seconds. Well, here's the thing. Just shave a few seconds off of that. Let's say if Bach had written one less measure, 86 measures, instead of 87 measures, it would have lasted 520. Well, look at this. Realize this, that 520 is in a 2-to-3 ratio to 8. So if you take 8 minutes, 8 minutes is, or no, I mean, if you divide 8, just do the math. If you go the number of seconds here and the number of seconds here, they're at an exact 3-2 ratio. Okay, so trust me, it's true. I mean, you can calculate it out. But Bach seems to have had many different types of 3-2 relationships like this that he would work with. He would do 3-2 ratios with 8, like a long duration, like 8 and then 520. Sometimes he would have 4 and 240, so it varies. But in this particular cantata, I'm finding that Bach preferred 8s, because look at this. Here's another thing. And here's the kicker when we get to the third movement of the piano concerto. Here, look. The third movement is an alto aria in B flat, 4/4 time, 124 measures. It's a moderate sort of style aria, assigning just a moderate tempo of 63 beats per minute. If this is done, if 124 measures of 4/4 is done at 63, it will last 752. Well, look, 752, 755. Look, those are virtually equal right here. Virtually equal. So that tells me that this can be rounded off to 8, and it also tells me that Bach was most likely aiming for 126 measures in order so that it would last 8 minutes long at this tempo. See, so what this tells me, this analysis, is that Bach actually sort of composed backwards. What he did was he decided, even before he composed the cantata, he's told himself, okay, I'm going to make the first movement 8 minutes long, and I want the second movement to be, in a 2-3 ratio to 8 minutes. So he decided from the outset, before he even put pen to paper, that he wanted an 8-minute opener, 8-minute opener with a 5 1/3 minute movement after that. See? And then he wanted to follow that with another 8-minute movement here with the aria. So you have this 8 minutes, 5:20, and 8 minutes right here in this. Now, cantata number 146 comes from 726 to 728, sometime in that time period. Now let's jump to the harpsichord concerto. Okay, so let's look at this. So we have the first movement exactly the same, 190 measures, 96. Okay, everything's the same, right? So what Bach did now, 1738. So this is, let me see, 26. It's like basically 10 years later. So Bach came along 10 years later. He borrowed from himself. He took the first two movements from his cantata that he had written 10 years previously. He just put those in there, turned it all into what he needed to do. It's exactly the same, basically. All he needed to do now was compose a third movement. Here is the really astonishing thing now. When you assign, well, he says allegro here for the third movement, but I think that the third movement is a little faster. So even though he marks allegro in the first and allegro in the third movement, really, they should not really be at the same tempo. No one ever plays them at the same tempo anyway. So I'm assigning the next tempo, one of Bach's fastest tempos, which is often actually referred to as presto, but he just says allegro here. So I'm assigning it the next tempo up of 108. So the first movement has a fast allegro of 96, and then the third movement, because it's in 3/4 time, usually 3/4 times can afford to be a little faster than 4/4 times. So naturally, it's a little faster. So if you perform the third movement at 108 beats per minute, it has 286 measures in 3/4 time. Well, you can do the math. It comes out to 7 minutes and 56 seconds. Okay, what does that tell us? What does that tell us? Bach was thinking back 10 years ago, and he was thinking, well, I made my cantata 8/528, so I'm going to do that with my concerto too. I want to make the first movement 8 minutes. I want to make the second movement 5 1/3 minutes, and I want to make the third movement also 8 minutes, and I want it a little faster at 108 rather than 96, see? So this is how Bach composed his D minor piano concerto, and this tells us exactly how fast he wanted it. He wanted the outer movements to be 8 minutes long, and he wanted the inner movement to be 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Although in actual practice, it really should last 5:26. I would say 5.5 minutes. So you're safe with, with a retard in there and some expression and everything. We can stretch it out a little bit, but not too much. I would say, you're safe with like about 5.5 minutes here. So those are I think the correct durations for Bach's piano concerto. So what you need to do now is surf YouTube and listen to various recordings and see how close the conductors and performers come to 8 minutes, 5.5 minutes, and 8 minutes, and see how close they come to those for each of these movements. If it is off, if they're off considerably, like by more than 15 seconds, you can just use speed control. It's really fun, actually. You just put the speed control. Usually what I do is if it's off by, say, 30 seconds, I put it on about speed control of 10% off, like if it's, either 10% faster or 10% slower, because it only goes in multiples of fives right now, the speed control. So, but if it's like 15 seconds off or something, it's a percentage, of course. So, sometimes you can put it on just point, like 5% slower or 5% faster and listen to it. Often you'll have to put it, sometimes you'll even have to put it on 15% slower or faster and listen to it, especially with this last movement. I think almost everyone plays this last movement too fast. But it's very quite amazing that a lot of people play the first movement correctly. You'll find a lot of performers perform. There are many performers whose durations last very close to 8 minutes. I mean, that's very common. So there's no problem with the first movement here. I think the Adagio is played too slow by pianists. I think it's played better. It's done better in the like in the Cantata, for example. And I think that, like I said, I think that most pianists play this third movement way too fast. So if it doesn't last 8 minutes, use the speed control. Find a good performance of it, like a really fine performance that is just maybe too fast or too slow. And then use the speed control, and then try to find the speed control that will take you to the duration of closest to 8 minutes as possible. That will be the correct tempo. That is always the correct tempo for this concerto. It's 8 minutes for the outers and 5:20 for the inner. It's really a simple thing. This is what Bach wanted. And if you're interested in this, look forward to my book in progress, Tempo and Duration in the Music of Bach. Well, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.